Hello everybody, it's your boy Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming here today with Did Xenoblade Chronicles 2 foreshadow Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Xenoblade Chronicles 4? Curious and curiouser. Has your curiosity been piqued perhaps? Mayhaps? Let's talk about it. So I've been replaying Xenoblade 2's story on stream recently, for those who may not be aware, and I've been having a great time. And it's got me thinking more and more of the actual events of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And there's one scene that sprang to mind. I'll actually get to it in the next stream. Near the end of the game, once you reach Elysium and are about to enter the room with Klaus, you go into this dreamlike sequence where all the doubts and unspoken fears that are deeply rooted in everybody, and all those concerns of the entire cast, they're just laid before you. And you go through a gauntlet as Rex, fighting your party members. It's cool enough of a fight section, cool, you're fighting all your party members that you've been with for almost 100 hours at this point. But then there's this one scene following right after the gauntlet. It's very simple and straightforward, and many people may not have thought much of it at the time. And you may still not think about all that much now, other than, oh, it's a pretty cool scene. It's the scene of Rex, and Pyra, and Mithra in their own separated forms, essentially living in Auntie Corinne's house back in Leftheria. They are by themselves, Pyra's preparing dinner to eat together. And Rex, he acts confused, expecting them to turn on him like everyone else did. He's waiting for some kind of big gotcha moment where they'll pounce on him and try and, defeat him in combat. But funnily enough, they act as if they don't know what he's talking about. Pyra chides him for not washing his hands before they're about to eat, and he goes outside to, wash his hands and gather his thoughts. Okay, cool. Just a scene depicting what life could be like for them in an ideal setting, where they don't have to save, the entire freaking world and meet the creator of everything, besides all that. Yeah, it's a nice what if, but where does this go? Why am I making a video about this one scene? I mean, just to tell you it's good? Well, Rex knows that something isn't right, and he sits down as Pyra and Mithra try striking up ordinary conversation, while serving dinner, having bread rolls, and the like. However, it's at this point where Rex tries to pretend that everything's alright. He only is able to last a few seconds before all the emotions just boil over for him, and he breaks down, repeating how he can't handle this. Something's not right, and everybody's acting strange. He repeats that word over and over again. Strange. Everybody is acting so strange. And not the doctor. He knows that this reality is nothing more than a dream, and he cannot handle the emotional, gut-ripping guilt of him being in his own paradise when he knows everyone else is suffering out there, and that he can still do something about it. He still needs to talk to Malos, he still needs to talk to the architect. There's still a world to save. And Rex is not the type of character where he can sacrifice others for his own self-interest. The guilt metaphorically rips him apart as Pyra and Mithra tell their father, the architect, to cut the dream. Okay, cool. Rex picked a selfless desire to save the world for everyone over his own personal interest. Cool, he's not a jabroni. But, Jmulls, what's the big deal here? Why are you recapping this scene? What's the point of all this? Does this scene sound familiar to you at all? The story, the exact scenario of what just happened? It's the same message and almost the same scenario as the plot and message of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, where Ionios is this perpetual now, and while the world is eventually ending, people are caught up in this eternal cycle of war, choreographed by Mobius. Anne and M were able to find happiness alongside a bunch of other people in the city. And yes, it would have been easy to stay secluded in the city, and ignore all the pain and suffering going on in the rest of the world while they focus on their own happiness. But the thing is, that's wildly destructive to society as a whole, and even mentally taxing, and borderline toxic to yourself, as evident with M's guilt of becoming Mobius while everyone else suffers. N knew the harm it was causing others, but he relished in his selfish desires and ignored the state of the world. And you know what? Ignoring isn't even the right way to phrase that. Continued that cycle is more apropos. N and M became Mobius and continued that cycle and allowed the world at large while also allowing others to suffer for their own happiness. M's conscience eventually got the best of her, and she ended up siding with Ouroboros in the end, but N didn't until the very end of the game, when he was finally swayed, after literally losing everything. Noah was presented with the same exact query. He could stay in this perpetual now, this eternal present, this dreamlike world for him. But it would be at the cost of everyone else, and that's just selfish. Hell, the world was falling apart anyways due to annihilation events, slowly but certainly. Just like how if Rex stayed in that dream in Leftheria, Malice would have succeeded in destroying the world of Ulvest. That home back in Leftheria, that's the same metaphor that is used with Ionios. But whereas Xenoblade 3 ends with the same decision that Rex made, to end that dream, that glorified HDR on fantasy, and to return to reality and continue stepping one foot after the other into the future, Xenoblade 2 continues on. It tells you what happens next. It may be the last chapter of the game, mind you, but there is still a game to be played there. And back in Xenoblade 2, Rex manages to defeat Malice, but due to the beanstalk learning what gravity is, when its stalk gets snapped like a freaking stick, Mithra and Pyra sacrifice themselves to ensure Rex and crew are able to escape. And now that I'm recording this, there's also a parallel to be drawn at the very end of Xenoblade 1, where Shulk has the opportunity to create a world where he's the god in so that everything he wants to have happen there can happen, but he chooses and elects not to do that. But he doesn't want there to be a god ruling over everybody. He wants everybody to be able to make their own personal choices and decisions, to have that free will. Rex makes the decision to get out of the dream and not wallow in that perpetual dream that by all accounts is his paradise. He wants to just be able to relax and not worry about everything, just have Pyra and Mithra be safe and happy. But that would come at the cost of eliminating that power of choice, that free will from everyone else, because Malice would kill them all. Same logic with Xenoblade 3. How in Ionios, people don't really control their own fate. They're stuck on this perpetual treadmill of war and cycle of rebirth. But at the end, Ouroboros and Noah specifically choose to give free will back to people and break that cycle to step forward into an uncertain future. And it may come at sacrifice. Remember in the end of Xenoblade 2, Pyra and Mithra sacrifice themselves to ensure Rex and crew are able to escape. And some comparison could definitely be made with Rex losing Mithra and Pyra there. In that moment, to Kevers and Agnes losing each other as Origin recreates their world and sends them on their way. But again, Xenoblade 3 ends with that. It ends with that sacrifice. Outside of that very final scene that's kind of up in the air for your interpretation. But back in Xenoblade 2, there's another scene of the gang going down to this recreated world with the Titans headbutting a continent and then I assume die? Yeah, kind of a bit morbid there at the end, when you really start to think about it. And as they're descending on the back of Gramps, the conduit or Klaus or whatever is able to grant Rex his one last wish and recreate Pyra and Mithra, but this time in separate bodies so that they can go on living in this new future of their own design, so that they can go on with their own free will. The message being that while the future is uncertain and it can be painful, it's a necessity, and that with enough hard work and collective effort, these inevitabilities of the world can be avoided and choice can be brought back to people. The dying world of Ulrest and the Cloud Sea at the hands of Malice was able to be averted at long last, and while the future is never certain and sacrifices may end up having to be made, you can create a more beautiful future than you could ever dream of, that you may never even know or knew was a possibility because you were so rooted in that stagnation and self-destructive nature that wallowing in the present can be. Because wallowing in the present, and this is a common theme with Xenoblade as a series, it's one of the core pillars of the game and message it's trying to convey, is that wallowing in the present or the past takes away free will. And that free will is what defines us as humanity, and allows us to march into the future with our chins held high, or our heads held high. That free will is critical. And honestly, that's why I'm in favor of Mithra and Pyra being brought back at the very end of the game. Some people say it was a bit of a weird ending that after they just sacrifice themselves and you have this big emotional moment, and right as the game's ending, oh, Pyra and Mithra brought back to life, happy ending for everybody. But that's not the point. The point is that they are able to have free will now, and that through the collective effort, everyone is able to achieve a dream, not necessarily achieve a dream, but create a future of their own design where they can have the right to choose what they want to do with their future. The dream world Klaus had Rex experience with Pyra and Mithra was a good dream for them, and everything he wanted, but it was a cheap imitation of reality. It was the easy way out. instead of confronting the larger issues of the world when you have the power to make a difference, or at least contribute on some level. Because while sometimes your dreams may seem amazing, and you want to continue dreaming them, and maybe you are afraid that by waking up, you will never be able to have that dream again, waking up to a reality, that is still important, because the body would rot away otherwise and disappear into nothingness instead of waking up, putting boots to asses and making that future, that dream, a reality that you want. You're not guaranteed it. Not everyone's going to have a happy ending, but at least you'll have free will. One of the main reasons I adore Xenoblade as a series is because while it can throw a bunch of negativity at you, a whole bunch of emotion, primarily sorrow and loss, at the end of the day it's an optimistic series, where the message that you can always walk away from is that no matter how bad things can get, no matter how black that night is, you can always find a dawn. You might need to work together as people. You might need to shout until your voice is hoarse, and you might need to fight tooth and nail to achieve it. But a tomorrow will come, and it can be of your own design, and you can make your dream into a reality. And whereas a lot of other games and stories may end being, oh, just power of friendship and make everything you want it to be, Xenoblade puts you in these impossible situations and makes you come face to face with these harsh existential problems that are plaguing the people of these worlds. But you have to claw yourself out nonetheless, and because of how you manage to create a better tomorrow in each of these games, it makes that final cutscene, all those moments, all the sweeter. Now, Xenoblade 3 is an outlier in that regard, because it doesn't show you a proven happy ending. It's entirely possible that Noah and Mio and the rest of the peoples of the Bionis and all rest never meet again, or that they experience some kind of tragedy in their own world. It's probably going to happen, let's be honest. Life is never about crossing that one finish line and then never having sadness or tragedy ever happen to you again. But it's also possible that they will reunite at some point. And while 3's message is closer to, irregardless if there's a happy ending at the end of it all, you have to be willing to step into the future. Because that's the message of Xenoblade 3. That you are not guaranteed a happy ending, but you have to be willing to step into the future and claim your free will regardless. And if we follow the formula of a Xenoblade story, then if there is a Xenoblade 4, one could argue that it would show the reforming of the worlds and bringing them all back together and undoing what Klaus put into motion all those years ago. Because maybe, just maybe, Xenoblade 2, that scene in that Klaus dream in Leftheria of the dinner with Rex, Pyra, and Mithra, maybe that scene and the moral and lesson that Monolith tried to tell in there was expanded on, fleshed out with Xenoblade 3. They took that microcosm of a little story there in Xenoblade 2 and fleshed it out into Xenoblade 3. Maybe, just maybe, that isn't all they did. But that final bit, where despite willfully sacrificing that momentary dream of happiness, you can put the work in and create a world, a future of your own design. Maybe that idea, that principle will be expanded on and fleshed out in Xenoblade Chronicles 4. I said this before in my previous Xenoblade 4 and Xenoblade 3 DLC prediction videos. I am not predicting a happy ending here. I think it's probable. What I am predicting, though, is that there will be a follow-up. Lord knows they hinted at the game enough, both with the ending of Xenoblade 3 not shutting up about seeing each other again, and the same thing with Nia's Ascendance quest. But then you also have the interview they did right before the game came out, saying the series is continuing. I'll put a link to that in the description. Maybe that is what Xenoblade 4 is all about. How, yes, Noah and Mio and all these other characters could have found happiness in Ionios, but that was the easy way out. It was this dream, and they didn't succumb to living in this fantasy world. They woke up, got back to reality, and now have to put the work in to make that dream a reality. And I predicted that Xenoblade 4 is going to exist, and that it will be a follow-up to Xenoblade 3, and that they will tell the story of the reforming of the two worlds. I've made those predictions before, but now I've been able to find a connection back into Xenoblade 2, and arguably Xenoblade 1 with that scene I mentioned earlier, where they have essentially told that story before. Will they tell it again? Will they take some creative license and some creative liberties with it? Possibly. But I think we will get a Xenoblade 4, and I bet that the story will be for us to rejoin the worlds back into one. That's my prediction. And instead of just some lines at the end of Xenoblade 3 saying, "We'll see each other again," and the interview saying we're continuing the series of Xenoblade, well, they've told the story before. They've done it in Xenoblade 2 and they've done it in Xenoblade 1. Will they do it again? And will they flesh it out and make it more engrossing add more nuance, add more context to that overall message? Possibly. It's also possible they tell a completely different story. And I've said this before. I'm open to whatever story they want to tell. I'm just saying, it feels like they are really trying to, and have at least been foreshadowing, this overall narrative arc of rejoining the worlds since Xenoblade 2. And maybe it wasn't deliberate back in Xenoblade 2, and only after the game released, they were like, you know what? We have a really cool message here with this one scene in Chapter 10 of Xenoblade 2. What if we flesh this out and make it its own game, and we can add even more nuance to that story? And then what if we do a follow-up with Xenoblade 4, where we flesh out that theme and message from the very end of Chapter 10 again? But again, add more nuance, add maybe a different perspective on the overall situation, and make it its own unique entity. I can see that happening. I can definitely see that happening, but I want to hear what you think, what you have to say. So leave a comment down below with your thoughts and your opinions on this little theory that I've whipped up for all of you today. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Would you like to see this happening? Would you not like to see this happening? Because whether or not you disagree with me, thinking that this could be what they tell and what you would like are two different things. And I want to hear your perspective and hear your opinions. And if you have a different theory, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hash it out with all of you. Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe out there, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.